Judge. Well, CNN's legal analyst and former sex crimes investigator Shan is live for us in Washington. Shan, Kavanaughs claims that he's impartial and non-partisan, but can we take him at face value, considering his performance last week?
During his performance last week, granted, he was under a tremendous amount of pressure, but under that pressure, I mean, as a former prosecutor looking at a witness under that kind of pressure, he cracked and seemed to reveal his roots, which is, of course, he was a very skilled political operative, and that came through very, very strongly. The op-ed this morning, certainly unprecedented. I cannot ever imagine a Supreme Court nominee writing an op-ed on their own behalf on the eve of the votes, essentially campaigning for the position. And I think that reflects the concern in his camp that he may have come across as being too partisan and ill-tempered. That's completely holding aside the question of the sexual misconduct allegations. And I think that's what he's trying to correct in the op-ed, is trying to say, hey, remember, I had a reputation of being impartial. I will be impartial. I'm not going to get on the bench and somehow punish the Democrats who opposed me. So it's a very odd situation indeed, very heavily politically charged.
Shan, his temperament certainly is being questioned, and we heard that from retired Justice John Paul Stevens, who we heard just beforehand, plus 2,400 law professors who signed a letter saying he does not have the judicial temperament for any court, let alone the highest court in the land. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I have to say, based on what we saw at those hearings, that seems a very fair assessment. I think, to be fair to the judge, you certainly do have to measure it against the body of his work and his other reputation. However, you know, I have to say, if this was coming up at the time that he was being first vetted by the White House counsel's office, I think he would have been disqualified a long time ago. But the timing is such that his back and the Republicans' backs are against the wall. They have to go forward at this point. Just the sheer volume of people who are coming forward and contradicting his testimony about his drinking, the multiple sexual misconduct allegations, again, holding aside how much investigation is needed, you know, the weight of them, there's just so much smoke here that there's bound to be some fire. And normally you can't have any smoke around the Supreme Court nominee.
No, you wouldn't think so. Well, let's talk about the investigation, because, you know, the FBI investigation, has it been thorough? Does it strengthen the Republicans' case for confirmation and exonerate Kavanaugh? Or are there holes, considering that Ford and Kavanaugh weren't even interviewed?
Yeah, there are big holes, but I do think it strongly strengthens the Republicans' position. This background investigation, it's important for our viewers to know, is very different than a criminal investigation. Background investigations are typically much further ranging and broad than a criminal investigation, because their purpose is to find any areas of concern, any negative information that the employer, in this case the White House, would want to know. However, here, the White House, the employer, does not really want to know any negative information. So it sounds like that they've curtailed and directed the investigation. We don't know that for sure, but it seems like they may have when you look at how many witnesses were not interviewed. There are some 20 or 28 witnesses that were named by two of the complainants who have not been interviewed. And my take on that is, you know, if you allow me to control who you question, you essentially allow me to control the answers and arguably the outcome of the investigation. And I think that's what the concern is here, that it was not a true wide-ranging background investigation, but really one done very quickly to really offer some political cover for Republicans to vote in favor of the judge.
Shan, I want to ask you, as a former federal sex crimes prosecutor, if Kavanaugh is confirmed, what message does that send to women out there who are victims of sexual assault who are considering coming forward?
Unfortunately, I think it sends a very negative message. I think there's been a lot of reaction to this already. You saw when Senator Flake was confronted in the elevators by survivors. I think it basically is sending a message to them that, hey, things don't look like they've changed very much. When a survivor comes forward against a very powerful man, that there's going to be a circling of the wagons and they're not going to be believed. The presumption is going to be against them. I think it's a very positive sign that there is so much dialogue about it. There's such a strong pushback from advocacy groups. But the overall message is going to be, gosh, you have a nominee with multiple allegations of misconduct. As a prosecutor, if I looked at that, I would say this really needs some serious investigation because there's a pattern here. There's the alcohol plus the misconduct. And sort of forcing the nomination through, I think that's a message to survivors and their advocates that things really haven't changed that much.
It's crazy to think that this is the climate, considering we're almost a year into the Me Too movement. Shan Wu, great to get your insight and analysis. Many thanks.
Nice to be here.
While